need to call my email.
Because I was so confused while you were asking me, you were already confirming. I'm going, oh, you're playing a really, really old meeting.
What has happened is we have gone to things and did you hear that was canceled?
Yeah.
And so I've asked Kelly to.
Yeah. She did a good job. She's called me like 3 times. Yeah. I recognize herself now.
Well, I made the mistake of not showing up to an event that was scheduled. I didn't realize it was scheduled, so I completely understand.
It's so fun.
I think I'm going to give 2 more minutes and then so that makes that easy, yeah. And were you there?
I got stuck in Isn't yours next week?
Yeah, she did, and then I did.
I know. You have my thought down there. I haven't seen you in forever. What's Kate? Second week of school. I'm wondering how they have to work. I've never
when they say, who's that lady? The one in the beige shirt?
My husband's birthday.
Oh, okay. Just say the other half.
The other half is
Okay.
I know. Was his campaign manager. We met all the time. Well, he went front faces. No, we were all. Oh, you thought that? Yeah. Well, Tom and Becca, I think he's been on the BBC for he worked as his legal assistant across the street for a couple of years. Really? She's done that. Well, that's better.
Thank you.
Are you interested in politics? Or you well, I had no idea what I was doing. I was in the How are you?
I am good. Think a lot about you, but I haven't seen you for a long time.
I kind of shared the there's that month in the summer. You got into it. Yes. I don't know what I was doing there either. I've never done it. So it was just kind of a big, it was really cool. Exciting. Yeah.
So I think you go 3 hours. I'm stalling. I'm sorry, first meeting of the year, so people are often late, And everyone knows there's also a United Way meeting, so we have a different mix of people today. Because some people are over there, and I got lots of emails saying I was over here, but I can't do it. Everyone knows where the bathrooms are? Down that hall that way? Okay. Everyone knows there's coffee and water? Okay. All the important stuff, And then does everyone know the schedule for the year? Okay, so next month we're having commissioners. So we're having 6 of the commissioners running. So Yenny, Peck, Delvin, Faith, Cook, and Jansen will be here next month. And we'll ask them, they'll just be across, we'll ask them all the same questions. It won't really be a debate, it'll just be kind of a conversation. And it'll be 8 to 9, and then if we do any business, it'll be afterwards. So we'll start right at 8, we'll end right at 9. So it'll be a different format that we usually use. And we put that in bold down here so you can see it. And then also at the bottom of this, if you have questions for next month's meeting, please submit them, and that way we can kind of cope with the questions and decide which ones we want to ask for October. Okay? Well, commissioners, then we're going to look at the Red Book in November and talk about services as we get into colder weather. The Red Book is DHS's resource guide. Then December, we'll do something lighter and more fun called the Workplace Zoo. What kind of animal are you in the workplace? And then January, we're going to do new tools, social marketing, square up, all the things that nonprofits and other agencies need. And then February, we're going to do Feeding the Tri-Cities. Then March is Domestic Violence Services presentation. Then April will be Grace Clinic and Tri-City Community Health. And then May will be CBC. And then June will be a discussion about housing in the Tri-Cities. Okay? So if we could just go quick around introduce yourself and the agency you're with, but no other info, so that we can start. When we get back around here, you guys can introduce yourselves. Okay. Okay. So I'm Mark Lee, Vista Youth Center, Planned Parenthood, and Safe Harbor.
I'm Christy Rasmussen, New Horizons High School, Vista Youth Center, Rotary. Meg Thompson, social worker between things. Paula Ball, Benton PD.
Tammy LeDue, Tri-Cities Residential Services.
Lee Ferguson, Tri-Cities Residential Services.
Danny Kelser, nurse with the Health District.
Andrea Palmer, I'm a student and I'm with the Health District. Nancy Chavez, I'm the new advocate for students in transition at North School District.
Okay, time out. You gotta speak up so I can hear you. Don't be shy. I'd love to know who you are. So say it one more time real loud.
My name is Marcy Chavez. I'm the new advocate for students in transition in Kennewick School District.
Thank you.
Christine's replacement.
Meredith Pahowski, Lord's Council Center.
Lori Shopstall, Lutheran Community Services.
Say it one more time.
Lori Shopstall, Lutheran Community Services.
Oh, thank you.
Alan Suarez with CBC High School Columbus Program.
Excellent.
I'm Ray Smith. Ray Smith, I'm an intern at CDC.
Peggy Buckmiller, Columbia Basin College Resource Center.
Deborah Wager, Columbia Basin College with Work First and BFET grants.
Say it one more time. Work first.
Work First, and this is kind of a strange name. BFET stands for Basic Food Employment Training.
Oh, excellent. Thanks.
Amanda Freeman, Columbia Basin College, training specialist for the Work First program.
Chuck Eaton, Substance Abuse Advisory Board.
Carol Moser, the executive director of the Benton Franklin Community Health Alliance.
Kim Kelch, Pasco PD.
Tamara Shindy Height with Planned Parenthood.
Gail Brown, Department of Human Services.
Ed Frost, pensioner.
And
Community volunteer.
and our moderator today.
And our moderator.
Terry Andre, Community Education.
Jennifer Morris with the Brad Klippert campaign.
Michelle Dupler, Tri-City Herald. I was the fly on the wall today.
All right.
Jay Clough, your legislative district candidate.
Brad Klippert, also candidate for the legislative district, and I'm going to try to be a fly on the wall too. I mean, how successful I'll be.
Okay, now it's Ed's show.
Okay, my turn. First of all, I want to thank the two candidates for meeting with us today. I know that both of them have very, very busy schedules leading up to the election. So thank you both for being willing to spend an hour with us. Now, we have some rules for today's discussion. Each candidate is going to get the opportunity to make a 5-minute opening statement. And we're going to start with Jay, because last time they met, I believe we started with his quote. So Jay will start, then Brad, and then each candidate will have a 3-minute wrap-up. Our official timer today is Mr. Mark Lee. So you might want to have something that keeps time there.
That's correct. Yeah.
And Mark will be watching that so that we wrap up the questions early enough so both Mr. Klippert and Mr. Clough have the opportunity to give us that 3-minute closer, okay? Now, two other rules about the question. They have to be questions. We don't want a 2-minute or 3-minute political statement with a question at the end of it. We want actual questions. And we're going to ask that both candidates get the opportunity to answer each question. So we get to see how they both look at the question. So please don't aim questions at either one, because both these gentlemen get to ask or answer the same question. Okay? Everybody got the rules straight?
Can you guys see this? Is that big enough?
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
Whoa. Wow. You have a scoreboard too, Mark?
There you go. Give you your 5 minutes.
Okay, that's incredible. Thank you.
Good.
With that in mind, Jake?
Are we set?
As soon as you start talking.
My name is Jay Clough. I'm from this area. I was born and raised in the Tri-Cities. Born in Richland, raised in Kennewick. For a year or two, I actually grew up with Lori over there. Me and her little brother were good friends. I come from, for this group, you might be able to appreciate this story. I grew up in a very eclectic family. I was a product of a shattered home. It was very, very broken. And there were times where we were very, very poor, and there were times where we had enough money, and there were times when we had more than enough money. I was lucky enough when I was about 12 years old to be adopted by my stepfather, and that's the father who I call my father. That man took me out shooting behind Jump Off Joe. Some of you may have done that. I don't know if any of you are gun enthusiasts. He taught me the necessity for working hard, taking responsibility for your actions and for your community. I, because of him, was able to graduate high school, to go on to the Marine Corps, where I used the GI Bill to go to Central Washington University. I received 2 bachelor's degrees there, and also had the opportunity to study abroad in Beijing, China, studying language and culture, and Seoul, South Korea, where I studied language and culture. After that, I came home and decided that I wanted to chase down a girl. And so I chased down my wife, who's Japanese, but we met in Korea. We were both foreign exchange students. And so I followed her to Japan, taught English for 3 years, and finally convinced her to marry me. And the second that she married me, I said, honey, I got to go back home. And so I came back here to the Tri-Cities and started working out at Hanford, where I was a radiological control technician. Maybe a year after she was here, we had a daughter, Kennedy Akira, and she's 17 months in 5 days. And she is my entire world. And so I'm very, very invested, not only in this community, but in the future of my daughter, making sure that there are services available to her and children of her age, and to make sure that they have the opportunities to go to college or trade school or apprenticeship programs, and make sure that my daughter and children of her age and her generation don't have to go through the kinds of things that I had to go through. And I think it's very important that we have a lot of the services that you provide to make sure that that doesn't happen. I know that my family has been the recipient of some of your services. And so I'm very happy to be here with you today, and very grateful for the services that you provide for the community. To make sure that there is a ground floor in our community, that no one falls below this ground floor if we can help it. And we need to make sure that we strengthen this ground floor and make sure that it's available to everyone. My priorities for this this race, I guess, if you elect me or when you elect me, are to diversify the economy, to make sure that we have a good variety of jobs available to people in this community as Hanford ramps down. I would like to see Hanford expand its nuclear footprint with modular, and make sure that we are protecting the legacy of this community, making sure that cleanup happens. But I'd also like to make sure that we have something else for people as they may or may not get laid off from the area. Making sure that we have, in my opinion, manufacturing for this community. To make sure that we can employ people from the lowest skilled labor all the way up to the highest skilled engineer and scientist. Making sure that we're supporting our high-tech industry. Making sure that we are supporting the creation of jobs in this community. And we'll need to invest in infrastructure to do that. Making sure that we're supporting our wine industry so that we can close that gap. Not completely, but try to narrow it with California. We have the best wine in the world, and we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to promote that wine nationally and abroad. And then finally, but not lastly, making sure that we're investing in education, not cutting education. Because education is the way that people like me get out of the situations that I was in and reach success for the future, in the future. So making sure that we're fully funding education as we're constitutionally obligated to do, and making sure that there are resources for middle-class families to send their kids to school now that tuition is becoming more and more out of reach for so many of them. So thank you very much, and please vote for me November 6th.
Okay, now, next will be our incumbent representative, Mr. Brad Klippert. Brad, he left actually a second on the table, so.
Thank you, and I hope to leave more than that. We'll see how it goes. First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today, because there's so many other places in the world that you could be right now. So you've taken time out of your very, very busy schedules to be here today, because you care about your community, and especially the issues that you represent today. So thank you for taking your time to be here today with us. I also, want to take the opportunity every time that Jay and I are in the public together to thank Jay for running for this office, for taking upon himself the civic responsibility to follow his values and his convictions and his beliefs, because competition in America and this world makes us better. Okay? That's how the free enterprise and the free market system works. If you can produce a better product at a better price, then the people are going to vote you in by your being able to do that in the business sector. And so I thank Jay for running, because it makes me sharpen myself and makes me want to do my job better and represent you better, because of the spirit of competition that Jay brings to this race. So I got an email that said that I should do a 5-minute open and a 3-minute close, as has been described. And the topics that was given in that email said schools, health, abortion, and women voters. So those were the 4 topics that were given in that email that would be discussed today. So let's just cut to the chase. Schools. I think that we have in Washington State and in America some of the greatest schools in the world. Washington State schools, if you don't know, for the last 9 years in a row, last 9 years consecutively, has had the highest SAT scores in the nation. So that we have been doing a better job preparing our kids for college than any other state in the nation for the last 9 years in a row. Could our school systems be better? Absolutely, positively. We need to continue to recruit, retain, and reward our educators who inspire and educate our kids. And education is just not enough, because I also use the word inspire. One of the things that I've heard here recently is by 2020, 50% of all the engineers in the world, in America, will come from different countries. They will immigrate here because there's not a strong desire of our kids to study engineering. Now, when I grew up, there was this TV show, it had Buffy and Jody and Mrs. Beasley and Uncle Bill, and what did Uncle Bill do? He built bridges and roads and buildings. He was an engineer and a businessman. And what do we have today? CSI Los Angeles, CSI Miami, CSI Navy, CSI. So what do kids want to do? They want to, be CSI investigators. So the media has a lot to do with that, but also I think teachers have a whole lot to do with that. And you, the public, have a lot to do with that, especially here in the Tri-Cities, where we have per capita more PhD level educated people in the Tri-Cities than anywhere else, I think, in this nation. And so when those people do public-private partnerships with our educators and come into our schools and do programs where they can come in and talk to the kids and inspire them to go on to be engineers and do the wonderful things that they're doing here in the Tri-Cities, that's incredibly important. We also need to get rid of many of the unfunded mandates that the legislature has passed down to schools. The legislature said, you must do this, you must do that, but we don't follow it up with dollars. And so I've had many of the principals and the administrators from the school districts come to me and say, Brad, if you can't help us with dollars, can you help us with some of these unfunded mandates? All these mandates that the legislature has brought down on us that aren't followed with dollars. I said, absolutely, positively. And we've worked on that. Health. Obviously, we need to have affordable health care in this nation and affordable health care insurance. I am a strong believer in the power of the private sector. Okay, so what do I mean by that? The example I gave in the last time that we got to be together was the example of UPS, Federal Express, DHL, those 3 businesses and how successful they are as compared to the U.S. Postal Service. These 3 businesses are private businesses that compete against each other for your business. They got to produce a better business, a better product, a better service at a better price, or they're voted out of business by you, the consumer. Who runs the U.S. Postal Service? The government. And who is in the most direst straits financially for decades? I mean, it has been the U.S. Postal Service, because government-run agencies, Ronald Reagan said there's nothing more expensive than a free government program. So obviously in the United States we've proven that's how we won the Cold War. Did we fire any rounds to win the Cold War? No, it's free enterprise, free market society, which is the better way of doing business that won the Cold War. Hey, thanks, my time's up. I only got to 2 of the 4 things I was supposed to talk about. Okay. Who wants to go?
Well, it's going to be easy.
Hi, I'm Avante Jackson from Tri-Cities Pregnancy Network. And the question I want to ask is about the polarized nature of our political discourse. And I think it is such a barrier to cooperation and collaboration when you have people with differing opinions, but a lack of respect and a lack of ability to have a discussion around facts and issues. It becomes such a demonizing kind of discussion that you can't get things done. I've had some time to be in Olympia recently, and so I've seen some of that. So my question for you is, how will each of you work to dissipate that so that we can actually have a conversation and actually have productive discussions and accomplish some good things for our state?
You want to go first?
Sure. Part of the problem with our political discourse is that we have begun to allow politicians to frame things in moral black and whites, as opposed to framing them in ways that are, we both want the same thing long term, we just have different views on how to get there. We've started to frame them in religious morals, in the frame of right and wrong, black and white, that's just the way it is. And when you are arguing against someone that you feel is morally wrong, then you have a moral responsibility to win that argument no matter what. So the first step to stopping the polarization of our politics is to recognize that we all want the same thing. I guarantee you that Mr. Klippert and myself both want this nation and this state to do very well. We may have different viewpoints on how that road should go, how we should get there, but we both want the end game to be the same thing. But you have to hold your elected officials accountable for that kind of discourse. When they start talking about things and framing them in religious right and wrongs or moral black and white, we have to hold them accountable with your vote. So the first thing that I will do, one, I'm a conservative Democrat, so ironically enough, him and I, Mr. Klippert and I, share some of the same views. And so we need to send people to Olympia that are able to cross the aisle, not because they want to get reelected, but because that's who they really are. And I think that everyone that knows me knows that I'm a pretty fair-minded person, that if you can make a better argument than I already have, so be it. Let's go that way. And so you have to elect people that have the ability to recognize when someone has a better argument than they do, and not be afraid to say, you know what, you're right. And so I guess I hope that answered your question.
Let me start off by saying to you and to many of the others of you who have been to Olympia multiple times since I've been in elected office, thank you for your time there, because I just want to say to you, there is nothing more powerful that you can do than coming to Olympia, especially those of you who come in mass and bring a whole bunch of friends with you, because you've seen what happens in those committee meetings. When people from the Tri-Cities come to those committee meetings, it has a profound impact, much stronger impact than we can make. It's when the citizens rise up. So thank you for being there, because you've been there many times. Thanks for the question. My answers may sound corny, but it's just honest and true. Hopefully I won't get too emotional here. Yesterday my phone rang, and it was one of my fellow Democrat House members who called me, and he said, Brad, I've been asked to take a leadership position, and it's a leadership position in something that he and I are both involved in. And his comment to me was, and it blows me away, he says, I just want to make sure that if I take this leadership position, Brad, you're going to be there. And this is a Democrat who called me from across the state to say, if I take this position, I want to make sure you're going to be there. And it just, you know, to me, the corny answer is although he and I are polar opposites on the issues, we both know that we love each other dearly as friends and as brothers and as fellow legislators. And we work together not only in committees, but, you know, away from committees. And I can say that there's another, I don't know if I have the right to share names. There's several of names I wanted to share with you, but I won't, because they haven't given me offered me the privilege of offering their names in these types of venues, but I've had another House member who's a Democrat on the House floor and in committee say, it's amazing how different Brad Klippert and I are, but he is my co-sponsor on this bill, and now here we are, final passage of this bill, so thank you. He can't use names, so I want to make sure he gave me a true statement. Thank you to the good gentleman from the 8th District for working with me on this piece of legislation. So Jay did a great job of explaining it. It's a matter of working together, and to me, I found the most powerful thing I could do when I got over there to be able to work with people across the aisle is to earn their respect and to work with them, and I've been able to do that a lot. I guess in closing, I want to share just one quick thing with you in closing, if I may. One of my fellow House members, who is a Democrat, chose not to run this time. And when we do that in the House, you get a chance to say goodbye to everybody. It's kind of a roast. And he went up there and just blew me away. I mean, here's a Democrat who sits across the aisle from me. He said, you know, I really didn't know how to take that guy for the 8th Legislative District because I do a lot of hooahs and stuff like that because I love my country and whenever we do the pledge and all that stuff. He said, but the more time I spent around him, the more time I understood him. He loves his God, he loves his family, and he loves his country. And he said, I salute you, gentlemen from the 8th Legislative District. So, it's working together, and mutually just loving each other. So, hope that's not too important.
Let's go over here. Chuck?
One candidate, I'm Chuck Eaton from the Substance Abuse Advisory Board. One candidate for county office supports a consolidated crisis response center which would provide a mental health court, and a drug court where the right professionals and our local judges would be able to provide more appropriate, effective, and less costly treatment for people who can be helped in other ways than incarceration. What policies would you advocate in Olympia to reduce the expenditure of criminal justice dollars on nonviolent, mentally ill, and/or chemically dependent individuals and provide them with the treatment and recovery services they need?
Let's start off with Brad this time.
Take turns each time.
Yep.
Do we want a timer or no?
No, they're doing it.
Okay.
You think they're doing well?
Yeah.
I'll try to be quick. Excellent question, and I'll give you for an example. Yesterday, for those of you who don't know, in fact, on my way here, I was called from work. Brad, are you available? Because I'm a deputy with the Benton County Sheriff's Office, and I work as a school resource officer during the school year. So I was called, and there's a staff, and I said, sorry, I'm en route here, and so they had to call another deputy. But yesterday, I was working with the Sheriff's Department, and there was a suicidal subject who had called and was distraught, and to the point of maybe I should just kill myself because of his financial situation. So, we responded, we did the police thing, and after we got all that calmed down and found out where we were, I said, no, I have no intentions of killing myself. I don't know what to do. But I shared with that man, he said, what is this? How can I help you? And he shared with me the things that he needed done. This gentleman is 78 years old. You know what he wants to do? He wants to work. I just want to find a job. And I'm 78 years old, and nobody will hire me because I'm 78 years old, and I have diabetes, and I need to find a job that I don't spend all day on my feet. He has a truck in his driveway, a diesel tractor, the full trailer. I said, I'm going to work with you, and I'm going to help you. We're going to work together. We're going to find, he's got to overcome the insurance problem, fill his tanks with fuel problem, and all of his license problems. I said, we can work together on this. So he's got my name and my numbers. So that's one thing. We have adult drug court here in the Tri-Cities, and every time we have a graduation, I do everything I can to be there to support them. And I have people today who will contact me and say, I saw you at that last drug court graduation. In fact, I sat next to you in the audience. Thank you for being there. Thank you for supporting the drug court. So you're right. Anything we can do to keep those people who have mental issues, who have drug issues, out of our criminal justice system and help them, give them a hand up instead of a handout, and instead of incarcerating them, that's dollars plus for us, and I would love to see that happen. It's not easy, but it's something that if we work together, we can make happen.
Well, here's a thing. Everyone here, I'm sure, is familiar with the Heart Grove Act. We are in desperate need of a facility that many of the people in this room probably have asked for. The Hargrove Act, if you don't know, is the state legislature basically said, we're leaving it to the commissioners to decide on voting on a 0.1% to 1% tax increase to provide services for mental health and chemical dependency. But so far, the political will has not been here in this particular community to vote for that tax increase. But that small tax increase would pay for something, for example, like a mental health facility, a 16-bed mental health facility. Right now, Washington State is 51st in the nation, behind Puerto Rico, in the number of inpatient beds for mental health and chemical dependency issues. There used to be places that we could send people in Eastern Washington, but they've all closed. And so that puts a tremendous burden on our law enforcement officers when they have to go to a call. You know, they're now trained to deal with that often. But that's every time they go to a call for a mental health issue, they're not going to a call for a domestic violence issue or a violent crime issue or something, whatever the call is. So it seems to me to be for long-term fiscal responsibility, we need to be investing in actual treatment. We have a problem also that in 2010 the state legislature cut funds for mental health treatments and said that basically you can't get help until you're in crisis, until you are at the point where you have to have help or you're going to be a danger to yourself or someone else. And so we get them treatment, and then as soon as they're not in crisis anymore, guess what happens? They get kicked out of the system. So they do this yo-yo thing. They go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's costing us some serious dollars here in our community. When if we just invested long-term into a facility that would actually solve this problem, get people the treatment they need, it would free up our firefighters, our police officers, and our emergency rooms. Because 90% of the people that suffer from mental issues or for chemical dependency end up in our emergency rooms at one point or another, 90% of them. And everyone knows that going to an emergency room costs about 10 times as much as it does to go to the doctor. And we, the taxpayers and people that carry insurance, pay the price for that. Something like $53 million worth of what we call charity care or uncompensated care in our emergency rooms goes every single year for people that go to our emergency rooms and don't have the money to pay for it. So there are a few things we do. One is early screening for mental health and chemical dependency problems when the person's behavior attracts attention of family, friends, teachers, authorities. Putting criminal proceedings on hold in abeyance with mental health and chemical dependency issues, or while those issues are being addressed, on the condition that the individual completes treatment. Providing case management follow-up so the original problem does not reoccur, or if it does, provide early intervention so the antisocial behavior does not reoccur. And assure that adequate treatment resources exist in the community. Again, the commissioners, and I hope that you hold them accountable for this when they come before your body, they have the responsibility to vote for this if they want our community to be safe and for these people to get the treatment that they need. They have a responsibility to our community to do that. To the police officers to go to the calls, to the firefighters to go to the calls, to the people in our community that may suffer because someone that's unbalanced does something that they shouldn't. So this is a serious need, and I hope that you'll hold the commissioners accountable for that. Thank you.
Okay, got the next question. Carol.
I have a question. So I just checked this out on the internet just to make sure. But the United States Postal Service is an independent establishment of the executive branch responsible for providing service in the United States. It is not a government-run agency. It's similar to the Department of Human Services here, contracting services of nonprofit agencies.
Excuse me, I thought we were going to ask questions, not make political statements.
So I'm just correcting something that I've heard twice now. So how do you see your position at the state level as helping the social service agencies in Benton and Franklin counties?
My turn?
Yeah, my turn, right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It's early in the morning. You guys are used to this, I guess. I'm usually on my first cup of coffee with my daughter running around the house right now. As a state legislator, my opinion of what our responsibility is to make sure that we are, one, not cutting funding. My opponent, Mr. Klippert, has cut voted to cut $57 million out of our healthcare system. Of the 57, 40 million of it was a cut to the Disability Lifeline, and 224 million more in cuts to human services. So the first step as a legislator is to make sure that we are funding those services that address these issues. There are votes that come up, for example, like the Hardgrove Act, that push the buck to the local community. And that's great, because local government should have a say in what happens. But I feel that if a local government is unwilling to address the issue of, for example, mental health or chemical dependency, that there should be some kind of leadership on the part of your elected officials to at least, for example, make sure that someone from this community sits on the boards that make these decisions. Now, Mr. Klippert has had opportunities to have a say in those discussions when people are appointed to the boards that deal with these issues. But as far as I know, he has not pushed hard enough to make sure that our voice is heard in Olympia on the boards that make these decisions. So, again, fighting to make sure that Eastern Washington's views are heard, making sure that cuts are not continually borne on the back of the most vulnerable in our community, and making sure that they're showing leadership and not just passing the buck along when it's politically convenient, I think is very important. I hope I answered your question.
The three priorities that we have set in the House Republican Caucus are education first. And what does that mean? Currently, our education budget is approximately 43% of our entire state budget. So our position is, first, when we set up the budget, fund education first, and after education has been funded, after we've established the funding for education. Number two is the safety and security of our peoples. That's law enforcement, firefighting, as Mr. Clough has talked about. So public safety, number two, and then number three, and not number two and number three, actually all three of these don't, actually 1, 2, 3, except that we want to fund education first because of the fact of the McClary Act and decisions that have made. And then three, of course, is looking out for our most vulnerable. Some of you who are here today are associated with those with developmental disabilities. Some of my most pleasured times I spend in Olympia is when those with developmental disabilities come to Olympia and advocate to the legislature for their needs. One of the strong Republican stances that I've seen in many pieces of Republican literature are government's responsibility associated with social programs or to provide those services for people that they cannot provide for themselves. Okay, those are our most vulnerable. Okay, say for instance, yesterday, here's a man, 78 years old. He does not want, and he made it very clear to us, I don't want a government handout. I want a job. I want to be able to work. I'm still able to work and support myself. So I didn't try to offer him a government handout, social program. I said, sir, I will work with you. I'm going to help you do everything I can to help you find the job that you're looking for. So Republican priorities, one more time. Fund education first, public safety, and provide for the most vulnerable those social services that they cannot provide for themselves.
So to piggyback on what you just said, and you did a little bit, but how would you define your most vulnerable population?
Sure, it's my turn. Most vulnerable population, to put it in a finite answer, would be to do those things for people that they simply cannot do for themselves. And there are people out there who are not able to provide for themselves. Those, to me, are our most vulnerable. A lot of people would say that, man, when you reach 78, you should be able to, retire and let, kick back, and that's not what that man wants. So he would not be defined as one of our most vulnerable because he just wants to work and support himself and feels that he's able to. It's such a broad definition to say to provide for those people who cannot provide for themselves, but I can't think of a simpler answer, so hopefully that answers your question.
My answer is very simple. You go to the people that are experts in the issues, and you ask them. You go to community leaders, you go to folks like yourselves, and you ask them, who are the most vulnerable? What are the parameters? Who needs the most help? In college, you may not learn a lot in college specifically on issues, but you learn where to find information. And the one thing that I learned is go where the information is. If you got to have a definition for a word, you look it up in the dictionary. If you need to know the definition of something like you're talking about, you go to the experts. So the way that you define the most vulnerable is to go to folks like yourself and ask them, who in this community is the most vulnerable? You go to the mayor or the city council and you say, who in your community is the most vulnerable, and how can I help?
Okay, who's next? Okay, let's go.
I would specifically like to know how you plan to turn the economy in the state of Washington around.
That's a great question. Thank you for teeing me up. Specifically in Eastern Washington, although I think we're the fourth largest community in Washington State, we lack any political power, basically, in Olympia. Part of that is because we elect folks that don't have a lot of juice, as they say in Vegas, in Olympia. But part of that is because we don't have enough economic power. So my plan is you look at the problem and you find a solution. So the problem is that we have, in this community, a unstable labor market, to be gracious. About every 7 to 10 years, we lay a bunch of people off, thousands of people off out of the Hampton site because we rely so heavily on federal dollars. And federal dollars are tied to politics. And politics is just by its own nature, unstable. Goes to Mrs. Jackson's question about the polarization of our politics when we can't even pass a simple budget. The first step, in my opinion, is to invest in specific infrastructure projects here locally to attract manufacturing and to institute policies that will support our small businesses, creating an incubator for those small businesses so they can grow into larger businesses. So as far as the infrastructure stuff goes, Red Mountain Interchange has to happen. It has to. Because, for example, in West Richland, they have a problem with daytime employment. Most of the tax revenue that comes into West Richland actually goes to the county. It doesn't go to the city of West Richland. So, probably like 80% of it. It's a lot. So they have a hard time funding things. That's why they have something like, I think it's like 6 police officers. And they don't even have an animal control officer anymore because they laid that person off so they could hire another officer. And I don't think they actually hired another officer. I think they just are in dire straits right now. So they need daytime employment there. So the Red Mountain Interchange would allow them to attract manufacturing to the area and light industrial to the area. So that they could get more tax revenue, so that they could pay for services that everyone needs. Also, putting a lot of people to work in the process. In South Kennewick, the development's going on there, but beyond that, there's area out there that could be developed with infrastructure to attract manufacturing as well. And the 1,600 acres out of Hanford could be used for high-tech industry development, the energy park that Tridec is pushing for, and manufacturing as well. And a lot of the infrastructure is already out there, so it's a great deal for us to go ahead and bring people in there. One of the other things I would really like to do is work with the federal government to expand the Tri-City Airport so that we can get larger runways because manufacturers look for good places to put their businesses, but also ways to get their goods out of the community into the places that they need to go, so the ports or to places around the nation and around the world. So we need to have a long-term strategy for our economy here, and I think that if we do that, if we have a long-term strategy for our economy, we'll build up our political power. We'll start having more of a voice in Olympia, and they'll no longer be able to, ignore the fact that we're the fourth largest community in Washington State, and we're, I think, the fastest-growing community in the nation. So we should have much more political power than we do, and so I guess that answers your question.
Brad?
I don't know if anybody saw the article in Sunday's paper. The title, "The Plan for Businesses Will Do More Harm Than Good," is the title. But I think you hit it right on. If I'm just going to read to you 2 quick paragraphs. National Economic Council got it right in its May 2012 report, Moving America's Small Businesses and entrepreneurs forward. It links an economy built to last to sustainable small businesses. It encourages efforts to help small businesses expand and complete so they can do what they do best. Take risks, develop new ideas, grow businesses, and create jobs. And that is so well said. I just thought I would share it with you. And I totally and completely support that idea. Over 90% of the businesses in Washington State are small businesses, and that's a business that employs less than 50 people by definition in Washington State law. And then nearly 50% of all those employed in Washington State are employed by small businesses. So just to say one more time, it links an economy built to last, sustainable, and this article says small businesses, but I say sustainable businesses. Not only just our small businesses, but also our large businesses. We have some very large contractors and large businesses right here in the Tri-Cities. We have Lamson, you know, for one of those businesses that reaches worldwide. Jay has done a great job of talking about our wine industry. Do you know that the wine industry has come to us from South Korea and from Taiwan and saying, you guys we want to partner with you. We want your wines in our countries. Why? Because your wine is the best in the world. And they're coming to us to see how we can create partnerships to get more of our wines in South Korea and Taiwan. And so we got some great businesses here in the Tri-Cities, in Washington State, and they're coming to us and begging us, please help us with regulatory relief. Help us to grow, not by a government handout, but by taking the shackles off of us and allowing us to grow and to prosper. Because when we grow and prosper, we're going to hire more Washington State citizens and get them off the unemployment rolls. And then they're going to be able to buy more new cars and more things at Washington State stores, which is that's how we get our tax revenue the main way we do. And so help our Washington State businesses grow and prosper so they can hire more of our citizens. And then tax relief also, you know, coming up in 2013, the B&O tax is right now at 1.8, and is supposed to, by sunset, and Jay does a great job of talking about this too, that's supposed to sunset in 2013, June of 2013, and go back to 1.5. So they're begging us, please, keep your word to us. In 2013, June of 2013, allow that to sunset. Don't not allow it so that they get some tax relief. So because we in Washington State keep thinking that to tax businesses, the people with all the money is the answer. Well, when they get more taxes, they hire less people. And so it has a reverse effect. So help our businesses grow and prosper so they can hire more citizens. That's how we'll have a long, sustainable growth pattern in our economy.
Okay, who's next?
Oh, you guys, come on. Really? I can ask you guys some questions.
Is it probably our last question before the closing? No, we got a little time. We got a little time. Let's go. Is there anybody who has to ask a question?
Can I go? You can go and then I'll go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
One of the experiences I had in Olympia was coming across people who were either sponsoring or supporting legislation that they hadn't read. So it's a pretty simple question. Will you please commit to reading the legislation prior to supporting or sponsoring it?
George?
Yes.
Thank you.
It seems like a simple answer, and the answer is obviously yes. Just for Jay's sake, so that he knows, because I truly believe that this is a great leader. And someday he is going to be involved in the political process, whether this election or a future election. And he's a great man, and I have a lot of confidence with him. He's discussing great ideas. It's amazing. This is one of the times I get choked up again. There's a piece of legislation that came through a committee that I was in. And I think our legislation should be user-friendly so that the citizens of Washington State could actually read it and understand it and know what it means. All it needed was some punctuation changes. You know, move a colon here, a comma there, a period, stuff like that. I got word from a senator, because I was planning on just making it more user-friendly and understandable, from a senator, that if you touch my piece of legislation, nothing that you sponsor will ever make it through the Senate. And I just go, that's what I did too. I go, wow, really? I wasn't trying to damage her legislation. I wasn't trying to change the meaning at all, just so it could be read easier. You know how it works sometimes, you know? And so it's not always easy. And the answer is yes, because I was reading every dot and every tittle to make sure that it got to you, the citizens of Washington State, in a usable, user-friendly manner. So it's tough. And I know that would be both of our goals. But it's sometimes people make it hard to make it user-friendly for the citizens. But that would be both of our goals. Yes.
Okay, Peggy, last question is yours.
Okay, my question was on recently President Obama gave amnesty to immigrants, children of immigrants who have come to the United States who were brought here by their parents to allow them to have a chance to stay here. And so my question is, what is your opinion of that? And secondly, what do you think about the DREAM Act?
First of all, we need an answer to your question. We need radical immigration reform, in my personal opinion, not just in this state, but in this nation. And that's what I keep hearing over and over and over again in Olympia. This is not our job. Why won't the federal government step up to the plate and do their job in terms of immigration reform? So, and to me, the number one thing, amnesty, in my personal opinion, is not necessarily just a blanket amnesty the answer. The answer is to make reform in our immigration process for those people who are wanting and willing to work and are being positive producers in our economy and want to pay taxes and be citizens. We need to make an avenue for them to become citizens more easy, but still there needs to be a process and not just an amnesty thing. Okay, amnesty for all these people. No, but let's make the process easier. So if you want to become a productive citizen in the United States of America, there's a process we can help you get through quicker and easier so you can produce and help our economy. But I'm not a strong supporter of amnesty, and we talked about this in our last debate, that my very favorite, one of my grandest times last legislature is when we had an immigration reform bill that came before the legislature. It was divided right down the middle. I spent tons of time in multiple meetings with the Attorney General's office and several Democrats to work the wordings that are fit for both the Republicans and the Democrats. So instead of being divided right down the middle, we got a 98 or 97-0 vote. Anyway, everyone voted yes. So it's something that's a passion of mine. And there are people across the aisle that have dedicated to work with me on immigration reform.
I fully support the DREAM Act. No equivocations about it. I think that the fact that you have children that came here before they were old enough to make a decision for themselves and have saluted no other flag than ours, these kids are already model citizens, because in order to qualify for the DREAM Act, you had to have not committed any serious crimes, you had to have graduated high school, you had to have either served in the military or be in college. These are the kind of people we want to keep in this community. We want them to become engineers and scientists. We want them to become doctors and lawyers. And these children are the hardest working children you'll ever. I teach junior achievement over in Virgin Robinson Elementary School in Pasco. And these kids in these classrooms are the first generation. Sometimes their parents brought them over here, or they're second generation. And these kids get it. They understand. They understand that they have a great opportunity. And the fact that there are people that want to deny these children who would be fish out of water if they went back to Mexico or wherever they came from is just, in my opinion, unforgivable. These ideas, these polarization, like we talked about, Ms. Jackson talked about earlier in our politics, on these kinds of issues. The DREAM Act was a Republican and Democratic co-sponsored bill. It was a bill that both sides agreed on, but guess what happened? It became an election season. And the people that sponsored the bill to begin with all of a sudden backed away and said, oh, I can't support it now because that would hurt my party. It became party over policy. Now, as far as the blanket amnesty that President Obama did, I would prefer that presidents didn't use unilateral authority like that. I think that if our Congress, our legislative bodies work as they're supposed to, they won't need to. I think that many people were upset when President Bush did the same thing with a lot of issues, and with reason. Our president is supposed to be the weakest branch of government, not the strongest. Our Congress is meant to be the strongest. But when they drop the ball on something that's so universally understood that children, through no fault of their own, were brought to this country and know no other culture, are now going to be under threat of being deported back to a country that they know nothing about, and would not, I mean, it would be like me going to Mexico and having to live there. I don't know anything about that culture, and neither do they. So I'm 100% in favor of the DREAM Act, because in my opinion, it's the right thing to do.
Okay, we are down to the point now where we will have 3-minute closing statements. And since Jay kicked it off, we're going to ask Brad to kick off the closing statement. Is that fair, Jay? Here we go. And the clock is set, so
go. Once again, just want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. Thank you for the thought-provoking questions that you presented to us today. Thanks, Jay, for being here today. Just got to meet in the parking lot and walk together in the last debate that we had. We got to sit and have lunch together, so it's fun to work with Jay on this election. I am Brad Klippert. I have served you. It's been my honor to serve you as your state representative for the last 2 terms, 4 years. I look forward to the opportunity to serve you again in the legislature. As stated earlier, I have been able to work with multiple Democrats across the aisle, and of course with Republicans, but you can't get anything passed in the legislature unless you have bipartisan support. So many pieces of legislation that I've either sponsored or co-sponsored, I have in fact worked with Democrats to make that happen. I'm a deputy with the Benton County Sheriff's Department as a full-time job to support my family. I've been involved in law enforcement for over 19 years now, and so not only as a legislator do I get to create the laws, but when I go over there, I know about law enforcement, so I know the correlation between the two. That there's got to be, it's got to make sense. I'm also Lieutenant Colonel in the Army National Guard. I sit on the Public Safety, in the Veterans Affairs Military Operations Committee. So I'm for a strong national defense and for standing up for our veterans and those issues. I certified as a teacher in 1997. I've taught in everything from elementary school through college. And so for me to sit on the Education Committee, I know what it's like to be in a classroom. And I've been there and done that. I'm also I'm the ranking member on the Public Safety Emergency Preparedness Committee. I was nominated for that position, and our leadership said, yes, we want Brad Klippert to be the ranking member of that committee. On the Judiciary Committee, I worked in the courts in both here in the Tri-Cities, but also in Pierce County. So I worked law enforcement and in the courts on both sides of the state. So to sit on the Judiciary Committee, I know the correlation between enforcing the law and working with our judiciary and actually writing the laws. And I'm on the Transportation Committee, and a passionate thing for both Jay and I, in fact I know for both Jay and I, is to get this Red Mountain interchange. It's got there's 3 stages, 1, 2, and 3, to get that done. And we got some money this year for that interchange, and I brought both the chairs of both the House and the Senate here, and I showed them phase 1 of the Red Mountain interchange and why it's important that we do this, and they go, now I get it, now I understand. And so it's a passion of mine to help build our infrastructure so our businesses grow and prosper and get our goods across the state so they go around the world. Thank you. Time.
well timed. Jake.
First off, I want to pass this. I got about 10 copies of this. You can share it. This is information on the post office efficiency. Both CNN Money and Forbes magazine, neither of which are left-leaning, talk about the incredible efficiency of our post office and how great it is. And the reason why it's going under right now is because we have to fund their pensions for 75 years into the future. So I don't think it's fair to demonize our post office when they are the #1 ranked post office in the entire world. So putting rhetoric next to actual facts, I think, is very important. Okay? My opponent talks glowingly about education, but he has 3 opinions on this. Okay? The first opinion is we're the best, teachers rock, 9 years at the top of the SAT scores in Washington State, rah, rah, rah. His second opinion is, well, not opinion, but his action is that he voted against education funding, voted to cut $82 million in K-12 funding, and $30 million more in post-secondary, which makes it harder for your kids to go to school, because I'm guessing you're all in the middle class like I am. And then the third is, when confronted on this obvious contradiction, he says that the Constitution is too old and outdated. that it was created in 1889. We couldn't foresee what a burden education would become to our state, basically. When we talk about, for example, healthcare, I've already told you the massive cuts he's made, or voted to make, for our human services. $224 million is what he voted for. The bill that was for didn't ultimately pass, but he voted against the bill that did, that cut less. I think that it's important to support the children in our community. For example, child abuse reporting, extended the mandatory child abuse reporting requirements to specified employees of institutions of higher education, so janitors now have to report, that kind of stuff. He voted against that. Child abuse reporting, early learning, and human services, an act relating to mandatory reporting regarding abuse or neglect. He voted no. Making sure that there are scholarships available for our children in foster care. He voted, and 4 people voted with him. He has 19 votes just in the last session, where he was under 10 people voted with him. That's Republican and Democrat together. They voted against him and the 2 or 4 or 9 other people that he voted with.